All right, let's dive into this AQA GCSE History Explainer for America from 1920 right through to 1973. We're talking about a period of absolutely massive change, a time where incredible dreams were made, but also where a lot of dreams were broken. We are going to break down everything you need to know to absolutely nail this in your exam.
So, right from the get-go, AQA basically hands you the single most important theme for your exam. I want you to think of it like this. This whole period is a story of two different Americas. On one side, you've got the glitz and glamour of the American dream, but on the other, you've got this nightmare of inequality. Seriously, every single thing we talk about today comes back to this one central idea. If you can get your head around that, you are already well on your way to a top grade. So, here's our game plan. We're going to follow the specification exactly and break this massive 53-year chunk of history into three main parts. We'll kick off with the boom of the 20s, then we'll look at the bust of the Great Depression, and we'll finish up with the post-war era of protest and massive social change. And then we'll wrap it all up with the key takeaways you need to absolutely smash your exam.
Okay, let's jump right into this first period, the decade that everyone calls the Roaring Twenties. And it really was. It was an era of just incredible energy and optimism. But as we're about to see, all that energy created some really deep cracks in American society.
This slide just nails that core theme we were talking about. On one side, you have all this opportunity. Brand new cars rolling off the production line. New freedoms for women known as flappers, the amazing sound of the jazz age. But living right alongside it, you have this deep-seated fear. The rise of the Ku Klux Klan, a real paranoia about immigrants, and just widespread intolerance. It's two Americas existing in the exact same place at the exact same time. So, what was actually driving this economic boom? Well, a huge part of it was the government's whole attitude. Republican presidents basically let big business do its thing, and that created the perfect conditions for growth. You had mass production, something Henry Ford pioneered, which made things like cars affordable for ordinary people for the first time ever. This was then supercharged by new ideas like hire purchase, which is basically what we'd call buying on credit, and this massive new advertising industry that told everyone they needed to buy, buy, buy. It created a whole new consumer society where everyone felt like they could get rich on the stock market. But just under that shiny surface, America was a really divided place. The policy of prohibition, which banned alcohol, accidentally created a massive criminal empire for gangsters like Al Capone. Racial tension was just awful, with the KKK terrorizing African Americans, and you had this Red Scare which fueled a real fear of immigrants. This whole climate of fear and intolerance is perfectly summed up in the Sacco and Vanzetti case, where two Italian anarchists were executed based on some very, very flimsy evidence.
Okay, so let's move on. Let's see how this glittering boom turned into the most catastrophic economic bust in modern history, and what the next president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, tried to do to fix it.
Well, the party came to a sudden and truly catastrophic end in October 1929. It's known as the Wall Street crash. The stock market bubble just burst, completely wiping out the savings of millions of ordinary people and setting off a global economic collapse. This single event is the dividing line between the good times of the 20s and the absolute hardship of the 30s.
The impact was just immediate and so brutal. Businesses went bankrupt, farmers lost their land, and by 1933, a quarter of all American workers were unemployed. The president at the time, Herbert Hoover, he believed in something called rugged individualism, the idea that people should help themselves and the government shouldn't get too involved. Well, his response was seen as way too little, way too late, which made him incredibly unpopular and basically paved the way for a political earthquake.
And that earthquake was the election of Franklin D. Roosevelt. He got in by promising a new deal for the American people. Now, this wasn't just one policy. It was a massive wave of government programs, often known by their nicknames as the alphabet agencies. And they were all designed to fight the crisis on three different fronts. First, immediate relief for people who are starving. Second, long-term recovery for the economy. And third, permanent reform to make sure a crash like this could never, ever happen again.
Now, this slide here makes a really crucial point, one you should definitely remember for your exam essays. The New Deal, it helped, for sure, but it wasn't the final solution. What really ended the Great Depression was the Second World War. Getting ready for war kick-started American factories like nothing else could. And this wasn't just an economic shift. It was a huge social one, too, as millions of women and African Americans found new job opportunities that just weren't there before.
Okay, so now we're entering the final part of our story. America came out of the war as the world's undisputed superpower. This led to a brand new era of prosperity that, you guessed it, once again highlighted the nation's really deep-seated inequalities.
For many white, middle-class Americans, the 1950s felt like the golden age of the American dream. The economy was absolutely booming, which led to this explosion in consumerism. We're talking new homes in the suburbs, shiny new cars, and a brand new television in pretty much every living room. This was the era of rock and roll, a whole new teenage culture, and just this feeling of boundless optimism.
And right here, this is the essential question that AQA wants you to be asking. Was this amazing dream universal? And the answer is a very clear no. For millions of Americans, especially African Americans, living under segregation in the South, this whole picture of prosperity was a world away from their reality of discrimination and injustice. And it's this tension that really drives the history of the 1950s and 60s.
So it's no surprise that the post-war years saw the rise of the civil rights movement. In the 50s, you had leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. who championed nonviolent protest to challenge segregation. But by the 1960s, the movement started to change. You had new voices like Malcolm X and the Black Power movement coming through with different, more radical ideas. And despite facing horrific violence, these campaigns worked, leading to the landmark Civil Rights Acts of 1964 and 1968.
And at the exact same time, another massive movement for equality was building up steam: feminism. So many women felt trapped by this post-war ideal of being the perfect suburban housewife. Inspired by the civil rights struggle, groups like the National Organization for Women, or NOW, began campaigning for things like equal pay and an end to discrimination. This movement, happening while President Johnson was pushing his Great Society programs, scored a massive legal victory in 1973 with the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision.
So the really crucial thing now is how you pull all of this information together to build a top-grade answer in your exam. And honestly, it all comes back to that one big theme AQA gave us right at the start. Think of this table as your secret weapon. For every single part of the course, you can clearly identify and contrast the key examples of opportunity with the key examples of inequality. In the 20s, it's consumerism versus racial tension. In the 30s, it's the hope of the New Deal versus the grim reality of hardship. And in the post-war era, it's that suburban American dream versus segregation and discrimination. Use this simple structure to organize your thoughts, and more importantly, to organize your essay. And that brings us to our final thought. This isn't just a question, it's the question that underpins this entire topic. Your job in the exam is to look at all the evidence and come to your own balanced judgment. To what extent was the American dream a reality, and maybe more importantly, for whom was it a reality? Really thinking about that question is the absolute best preparation you can do.